Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the greatest recordings ever. And today we're talking about Handel's Solomon in this really stupendous recording conducted by John Eliot Gardiner. You know, Solomon, it's not like the other biblical oratorios. Well, is there any common biblical oratorio? You know what I mean? But it's rather static. It consists of a series of episodes or tableaux. It doesn't have a continuous plot going through it. But the music, I mean, who cares? The music is just glorious. Everybody knows the arrival of the Queen of Sheba, and, you know, that's a big deal. And, you know, it's always performed separately. But the orchestration of this piece is just incredibly rich. I mean, it's really much richer than most of Handel's operas, except for maybe Giulio Cesare. Let's look and see what the orchestra consists of, because it's really quite something when you consider, you know, what you usually get in Baroque music, which is like, you know, strings and a couple of oboes or something, and a horn on a good day. It's got two-part violins, and you've got about 6 or 7 of each of those, two-part violas, which is pretty remarkably rich. Of course, cellos, double basses, 2 flutes, 4 oboes in this performance, it looks like, or 3 oboes, 3 or 4 bassoons, horns, 1, 2, 3 of those, 2 trumpets, timpani, organ and harpsichord, and of course continuos. So that's a very, very big orchestra back in the day. And the singers are just stupendous. I mean, the singers here, we have Carolyn Watkinson as Solomon. Nancy Argenta as Solomon's queen, you know, because there was a queen. And then we've got Barbara Hendricks, who's just sexy. She's got such a sexy, kittenish voice. It's wonderful. It's the Queen of Sheba. Then you've got Joan Rogers and Della Jones as the 2 Harlots. I love the 2 Harlots. We'll talk about them in a second. Zadok, the priest, you know, as in the big, you know, coronation anthem, Zadok actually shows up here as Anthony Rolfe Johnson. And Stephen Varco is a Levite. You may wonder what a Levite is. Let's talk about, like, the story a little bit, or the subtext here. You know, it's a very interesting thing. People who are Jewish will read a little bit more into this than those who don't know sort of their Jewish history stuff, because all Jews, even modern ones today, fall into 3 categories: Israelites, Levites, and Cohens. Israelites were the common people, the general populace. Levites were the aristocracy and the military group, and the Cohens were the priesthood. And you can tell which group you're dealing with by Jewish people's last names. Cohens are generally Cohen, if your last name is Cohen or Khan or Kahan, something like that. Levites are Levi and Levite, you know, Levin, all those last names, Levine, they're generally Levites, and everybody else is an Israelite. And it doesn't go just by last name. I mean, you know what you are in spite of what your last name is. So even though in Handel's world, these people were distinguished by their group or caste, just like India had untouchables and all this. You know, it's a similar thing. Jews today know which group they come from. Still, thousands of years later, the line of descent has been preserved all this time. And I just thought those of you who aren't Jewish and who don't know that might find it interesting, because in Handel's oratorios, you deal with an Israelitish woman, an Israelitish man, and, you know, they have that stuff, and they have a Levite. There, we got a Levite. And they don't usually talk about the Cohens because it's Zadok, the priest. You know, he's a Zadok, but he's a Cohen. And that's a really, really little crazy detail, but it's something that you might be interested in knowing. So there's that. But then we get to the Harlots. Ah, the Harlots. One of the cool things about these biblical oratorios is that, you know, the Bible's kind of like, you know, full of blood and guts and death and violence. And in Handel's day, they didn't gild the lily. You know, they told it like it was. And the scene with the 2 harlots is one of the greatest things in all of Handel. Now, you know the story, right? The 2 harlots come before Solomon, arguing over a baby. who gets the baby. And Solomon, of course, says he's going to cut the baby in half with his sword. And the first harlot, who is not the mother, says, oh, great, terrific. The second harlot says, no, let her have the baby as long as it's alive. And so Solomon knows that's the real mother, and it's the wisdom of Solomon, right? That's how that goes. But the musical setting is so fabulous because it's a textbook example of how you characterize through musical means. The first mother is the evil harlot. The second mother, the potential mother, is the good harlot, is the good mother. And she's singing in very moving, legato, lyrical terms. While the first harlot, she's just a bitch. She's angular and nasty. And while the first one is singing about her love of her baby, the first one's going, false is all her melting tale. False is all her melting tale. False is all her melting tale. So you know exactly musically which one is lying and which one is real. And then at the end, there's this incredibly moving lament. After Solomon decrees he's going to cut the baby in half, the first harlot says, good, ha ha. As long as you don't get the baby, what a great idea. But the mother, the true mother, wait a minute, what does she sing here? I mean, it's really grisly. Can I see my infant gored with the fierce, relentless sword? Can I see him yield his breath, smiling at the hand of death, and behold the purple tides gushing down his tender sides? Ugh! Rather than my hopes beguiled, take him all, but spare my child. Pardon me, that's the first harlot. She's the good one. The second harlot's the evil one. I get them mixed up all the time. But there you have it. I mean, the words are just absolutely relentlessly gross. But this was real, and Handel makes it real. It's just such a fantastic scene. It really is. So, and the two harlots here, who are they? Joan Rogers and Della Jones, are just marvelous. And the other wonderful thing about Solomon is that the choruses are in 8 parts. They are big, juicy, rich, yummy, terrifically, fabulously glorious Handelian choruses. Absolutely extraordinary. And they're fabulously well sung by the English Baroque soloists, the Monteverdi choir. The English Baroque soloists aren't singing, they're playing. The Monteverdi choir is singing. Gardiner is just absolute best. And this is just a fantastically great performance of a fantastically great oratorio, which is really very seldom heard and seldom known in its complete form. So, I mean, for heaven's sake, what are you waiting for? Give it a shot, folks. Whether you're an Israelite, a Levite, or a Cohen, or a Goyim, you're going to love it. Trust me. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.